Some people can hold a whole storm inside and still answer, "I'm good," without blinking. They laugh at the right moment, reply on time, and somehow keep everything looking normal. But inside, every tone changes something. Every silence lingers, and every little shift gets felt. They seem steady from the outside because they learned early how dangerous visible feelings could be. Not dangerous in a dramatic way, just inconvenient, embarrassing, or likely to burden somebody else. So they became skilled at appearing manageable while carrying reactions most people never even notice. They can sense tension before anyone names it, and sadness before a conversation even turns. They catch the pause after a joke, the dryness in a text, the energy behind words. And because they notice so much, they rarely get the rest of true emotional ignorance. That's the strange part no one sees. People think they're calm because they're not loud. People think they're strong because they're not falling apart in public. People think they're unaffected because their face doesn't tell the whole story. But some people don't show everything because showing everything never felt safe to begin with. So they become translators of rooms, moods, glances, and shifting emotional weather. They read people fast, not because they're dramatic, but because their nervous system stays alert. They don't walk into a room and simply exist. They scan. They adjust. They soften their voice, their posture, their humor, and sometimes even their entire personality. Not because they're fake, but because being emotionally aware can become a survival habit. When you spent enough years trying not to upset the atmosphere, you get good at shape-shifting. You learn how to make yourself easier to receive. You learn how to look fine even when your chest feels heavy for no obvious reason. You learn that being low maintenance gets praised more than being deeply honest. So eventually, looking okay becomes second nature, even when you're overstimulated. Even when your heart has been quietly bracing all day. Even when one careless comment keeps replaying long after everyone else forgot it happened. This is why people who feel everything often confuse even themselves. Because their life can look stable while their inner world feels painfully crowded. They may have a job, friendships, routines, and responsibilities, yet still feel strangely overwhelmed. Nothing is visibly wrong, which makes their exhaustion harder to explain. They're not always reacting to one big event. Sometimes they're reacting to accumulation, to 50 tiny moments, to being perceptive in a world that rewards numbness more than sensitivity, to carrying emotional static that never fully leaves the body. A lot of this starts earlier than people realize. Some children grow up learning that emotions change the room. A parent gets irritated. A caregiver withdraws. A household becomes tense. And the child starts monitoring everything without even knowing that's what they're doing. They notice footsteps. They notice faces. They notice how long silence lasts after a question. That kind of awareness can look like maturity from the outside. Adults call them thoughtful, easy, independent, and emotionally intelligent for their age. But sometimes that child wasn't calm. Sometimes that child was careful. Sometimes they were reading the air because peace felt fragile. And if peace felt fragile long enough, sensitivity stopped being a trait and became protection. That protection follows people into adulthood in quiet ways. They become the friend who notices everyone's mood before noticing their own. They become the partner who senses distance before a single issue gets discussed. They become the employee who picks up unspoken tension and carries it home. They become the family member who keeps conversations smooth while swallowing their actual reaction. Because when you're used to managing emotional atmosphere, your own feelings get pushed backstage. Not erased, just delayed. And delayed feelings don't disappear. They wait, they show up later as fatigue, overthinking, irritability, numbness, or that weird urge to disappear. This is why some people look perfectly composed and still feel drained after ordinary interactions. A quick lunch can feel like emotional labor. A harmless text can trigger an hour of internal analysis. A group hangout can leave them needing silence, like it's medicine. It's not because they're weak, it's because they absorb more than they show. They catch subtext other people step right over. They notice when someone says it's fine, but means something else completely. They notice when affection gets slightly colder. They notice when a person is present physically but gone emotionally. And once they notice, they can't always unfeel it. That's where the hidden exhaustion comes from, not from overreacting, from over-receiving, from living with an antenna that rarely turns off. Even rest can feel incomplete because the mind keeps processing unfinished emotional data. They replay conversations in the shower, in traffic, while brushing their teeth before falling asleep. They think about what was meant, what wasn't said, and what might change next. And sometimes they hate that about themselves. They wish they could let things slide the way other people seem to. They wish a weird look could just be a weird look. They wish silence could stay neutral instead of turning into a question mark. But emotional sensitivity rarely works like a switch. It works more like volume. And for some people, the volume has always been too high. What makes this harder is how often they get misunderstood. Since they seem fine, people assume they are fine. Since they still function, people assume nothing hits them that deeply. Since they're not openly dramatic, people assume they're naturally unbothered. So the very skill that helped them adapt also makes them invisible. They become impressive on the outside and unsupported on the inside. They're the ones people lean on because they seem stable. They're the ones who get told, "You always handle things so well." And sometimes that sentence feels less like praise and more like a life sentence, because handling things well isn't the same as feeling okay. Holding it together is not the same as being held, and many people who feel everything are starving for that difference. They don't always need someone to solve them. They need someone who notices the effort behind their composure. Someone who can tell the difference between peace and suppression. Someone who doesn't confuse emotional control with emotional ease, because there's a hidden loneliness in being the person who understands everyone else. You become fluent in other people while staying untranslated yourself. You know how to make others feel comfortable, but not how to reveal your full weight. You can explain their behavior or excuse their distance and make sense of their contradictions. But when it comes to your own hurt, words suddenly feel much harder to reach. Part of that is fear. Not always fear of rejection in the obvious sense. More like fear of being too much after years of trying so hard not to be. Fear that once you stop saying "I'm fine," you won't know how to stop talking. Fear that if people really saw how much you carry, they'd pull away. So you keep editing yourself into digestible pieces. You tell the acceptable truth. You say you're tired instead of saying you feel emotionally bruised. You say it's been a long week instead of saying you're close to shutting down. You say you just need sleep when what you really need is relief. And over time, this creates a painful split. There's the version of you everybody knows. And then there's the version of you that feels everything in private. The one staring at the ceiling after a normal day, wondering why everything feels so heavy. The one who can sense disappointment in a single sentence. The one who feels guilty for needing distance, then lonely once they take it. The one who looks composed at dinner and unravels in the car afterward. That person is not broken. That person has probably been adapting for a very long time. And adaptation can look a lot like personality when you've lived inside it long enough. You may think you're just the strong one. You may think you're just private. You may think you're just hard to understand. But sometimes you are not hard to understand at all. Sometimes nobody ever learned how to read quiet pain unless it became obvious. And yours got very skilled at staying elegant. That's why emotionally sensitive people often feel ridiculous for being affected by small things. A delayed reply, a colder goodbye, a subtle change in someone's eyes. They tell themselves they're overthinking, even when their body already knows something shifted. And yes, sometimes the mind fills in gaps. Sometimes not every silence means danger. Sometimes exhaustion makes everything feel sharper than it is. But that doesn't mean the sensitivity itself is fake. It means the system is tired. It means the body has practiced vigilance so often that uncertainty feels personal. It means your reactions may be carrying both the present moment and older history. That's an important distinction. You're not feeling everything because you're weak. You might be feeling everything because your mind learned that details matter, because details once protected you, because being attentive once helped to avoid conflict, rejection, or emotional disconnection, and the body remembers useful patterns long after the original reason is gone. So now you can be in a perfectly ordinary conversation and still feel on guard. You can be loved and still brace. You can be safe and still expect some shift you'll have to absorb alone. That's what makes this so confusing. The outside can be calm while the inside still waits for impact, and people around you might never guess. They see capability. They see self-control. They're worn. They see someone who rarely asks for much. They don't see how expensive that self-control can be. They don't see the swallowed reaction, the tightened jaw, the careful breathing, the delayed collapse. They don't see the way your body sometimes finishes the conversation long after it ends. They don't see how one tense moment can echo for hours inside someone deeply perceptive. This is also why rest sometimes feels strange. When your identity gets built around managing everything well, slowing down can feel unsafe. Silence brings up what busyness helped you outrun. Stillness reveals what composure kept hidden. And suddenly you're not just tired. You're face to face with how much you've been carrying without witnesses. That's why some people cry only when they're finally alone. Not because the feeling started there, because privacy finally removed the pressure to stay organized. Their emotions don't arrive in the moment they're hurt. They arrive once the performance of being okay is temporarily over, and that delay can make them feel disconnected from themselves. They wonder why they didn't speak up sooner. They wonder why they laughed when something actually hurt. They wonder why they can comfort others instantly but freeze with their own truth. The answer usually isn't that they're dishonest. It's that self-protection became automatic. It happens so fast they don't even know they're doing it. Their first instinct is to keep the peace, protect the bond, preserve the atmosphere. Their real feeling enters later, once the social threat has passed. That isn't weakness, that's conditioning. And once you understand that, something important starts to soften. You stop reading your sensitivity as failure. You stop assuming your deep reactions mean you're unstable. You stop calling yourself dramatic just because your inner world has a lot of texture. You begin to see that feeling, everything, is not the same as being controlled by everything. That difference matters, because sensitivity can hurt you when it's unsupported. But sensitivity can also make you precise, intuitive, loyal, and emotionally honest. It can make you notice what others miss. It can make you compassionate without needing people to perform their pain loudly. It can make you thoughtful in a world full of careless reactions. The goal is not to become less feeling. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself just because your feelings are inconvenient. To stop translating everyone else while leaving your own experience unnamed. To stop treating your inner life like collateral damage from being easy to love. You don't need to glorify your pain to respect it. You don't need to call your sensitivity a gift every day for it to deserve care. You just need to stop acting like your quiet suffering doesn't count because it's quiet. Some of the most overwhelmed people you ever meet are the easiest to underestimate. They smile. They show up. They keep things moving. And nobody realizes they are holding back oceans with ordinary-looking hands. If this is you, maybe the healing starts with a smaller truth than transformation. Maybe it starts with admitting that fine has been doing too much work. Maybe it starts with noticing how often your body says no before your mouth does. Maybe it starts with letting one safe person see one unedited feeling, not the polished version, not the manageable version. The real one, because being deeply sensitive is hard enough without performing invincibility on top of it. And the people who feel everything were never meant to carry everything alone. So if you spent years looking okay while privately absorbing the world, hear this clearly. Your calm does not cancel your depth. Your competence does not erase your exhaustion. And just because you learned how to hide the weight doesn't mean it was ever light.